Hey everybody, I'm Jim. Welcome back to the channel. I want to do a reading update. I had a better reading week this week. I finished some things, so I want to update you all on that. And I've refreshed the active reading list too, so we'll talk about that. So the books I did finish, there's two books I finished. The Coming of Age by Simone de Beauvoir and A Fistful of Fig Newtons by Jean Shepherd. And I want to read some passages from both of these books to entertain and inform you. I guess we'll start with the Jean Shepherd book. This is Jean Shepherd, an American humorist, most famous for the film A Christmas Story, which plays around the clock at Christmas season. It's become a classic. He narrates that film. He wrote the stories around it. And if you like A Christmas Story, you're going to like Jean Shepherd's books. And this book is really kind of a fun read for sure. It's like an assortment of sketches, essays, like creative nonfiction essays, and then a lot of reminiscences, little sort of anecdotes and stories from his childhood and his time spent as a student and also in the army and things like that. But threaded through it, stitching it all together, is this kind of scenario where he's in his car and he's like headed through the Lincoln Tunnel from New Jersey into New York City. He's kind of stuck in traffic and he's like observing all the vehicles around him and the sights and sounds. And he also includes sketches, original sketches. There's a photo of Jean Shepherd. Sharon. Here's another one. And, like that. So the blurb on the back kind of gives you a feeling for what this is all about. From the wild and wacky world of your favorite storyteller come a dozen truer-than-life tales of college life on the GI Bill, of kidhood in Hammond, Indiana, of KP on a troop train, of tailgating on the Jersey Turnpike, and other familiar defeats and humiliations. He's satirical, he's witty, it's fun, it's nostalgic. It's just a nice potpourri of Americana. Anyone who's grown up in America in the mid to late 20th century, I think, can identify with this, or certainly your parents would identify with the work of Jean Shepherd. I always think of my father when I read Jean Shepherd. He was a big Jean Shepherd fan. We used to listen to him on the radio when we could tune him in. He had a show on WOR in New York City, and even though we were in Philly, you could sometimes tune in WOR on the AM dial. And he was just one of a kind. And a lot of Jean Shepherd's monologues and radio shows are available on YouTube. I'll try to remember to share a link to the channel that I subscribe to if you want to hear him. He was a great raconteur. And again, he narrates A Christmas Story. So if you like his voice, you would certainly love his radio shows. And he would love these stories. Characters that appear in A Christmas Story appear in this book too. He also had a couple television shows. He had a show on, one or two shows on New Jersey Public Television I remember watching. But my dad always sung his praises, and we had a lot of fun listening to him together. We went to see A Christmas Story when it was released. I don't think either of us realized that it would become the classic film that it became. Anyway, to give you a little bit of a taste of Jean Shepherd's prose and his style, I'm going to read some of this piece called Lost at Sea, which is some reminiscences of his schooling, like life at Warren G. Harding School, and just revel in his tone and the cadence of his prose and the sort of the over-the-top way he has of having fun with his memories. Lost at Sea. We're not going to read the whole thing. We'll just read a page or two. A wave of numbness surged through my body with stunning force. At last I knew what it felt like to be sitting with that brass hat on your skull, with those straps around your ankles, as the warden pulls the big switch. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught the glint of Mr. Pittinger's horn rims and the ice blue ray from his left eye. As the giant Baroque equation loomed on the blackboard, my life unreeled before my eyes in the classic manner of the final moments of mortal existence. I was finished, done. It had all come to this. Somehow I had always known it would. It all started in first grade at the Warren G. Harding School, where I was one among a rabble of sweaty, wrestling, peanut butter and jelly sandwich eaters. But it was not until the end of the third month of school that I became dimly aware of a curse that would follow me throughout my life. Along with Martin Perlmutter, Schwartz, Chester Wisniewski, Helen Weathers, and poor old Zinsmeister, I was a member of the alphabetical ghetto, forever doomed by the fateful first letter of our last names to squat restlessly, hopelessly at the very end of every line known to man, fearfully aware that whatever the authorities were passing out, they would run out of goodies by the time they got to us. I love how he just takes that kind of phenomenon. If your last name's at the end of the alphabet, you're always going to be last in line. Medical science has finally begun to realize that those of us at the end of the alphabet live shorter lives, sweat more, and are far jumpier than those in the B's and E's, and even the M's and L's. People at the tail end of the alphabet grow up accepting the fact that everyone else comes first. The Warren G. Harding School had an almost mystic belief in the alphabet. If you were a P, you sat behind every O, regardless of myopia. Me and Schwartz and Wisniewski sat so far back in the classroom that the blackboard was only a vague rumor to us. Miss Shields was a shifting figure in the haze on the distant horizon, her voice a faint but ominous drone, punctuated by squeaking chalk. Within a short time, we became adept at reading the inflection, if not the content of those far-off sounds, sensing instantly when danger was looming. Danger meant simply being called on. Kids in the front of the classroom didn't know the meaning of danger. Ace test takers, they loved nothing more than to display their immense knowledge by waving their hands frantically, even before questions were asked. Today, when I think of the classrooms of my youth, I see a forest of waving hands between me and the teacher. They were the smartasses who went on to become corporation presidents, TV talk show hosts, and owners of cabin cruisers. Carson, Cavett, Steve Allen, Cronkite, Donahue. There isn't a goddamn Wisniewski in the lot. Every one of those bastards grew up never doubting that he was destined to be at the head of the class with the rest of the mob, the Schwartzes, the Zansmeisters, forever in the lumpen world of the audience. We, in the back of the classroom, trod a rockier and far more dangerous path. Since we could neither hear nor see, we had only one course open if we were going to pass. The key was never to be called on. It was imperative never to be caught out in the open, if possible, not to be seen at all. Each of us evolved his own methods of survival. Fat Helen Weathers could sweat at will, surrounding herself with a faint, hazy cloud so that Miss Shields could never quite see her in focus, believing that Helen was just a thumb smudge on her glasses. Perlmutter had a thin, pale, beaky face that you could not remember even while you were looking at it. He didn't have to hide. No teacher ever remembered his name or whether he was even there. He'd sit for hours without moving a muscle, as anonymous as a pale hat rack. He was a born cost accountant. One day during an oral quiz, However, always a dangerous time for all of us. Perlmutter displayed the true stuff of champions. Miss Shields unaccountably called on him during an incomprehensible discussion involving the principal parts of speech, which seemed to be called participles or something like that. It was a discussion naturally only vaguely heard back in the ghetto. We thought Perlmutter was finished, but we had underestimated him. Without missing a beat, his face turned bright purple, his eyes bulged like a pair of overripe grapes, his neck throbbed, and a spectacular geyser of blood gushed from both nostrils. "This is terrible," Miss Shields cried, scooping him up in her arms and rushing him to the nurse's office, where he was excused from school for the rest of the day. She never called on him again. And you get the idea. Just so much fun. Gene Shepard. I love his touch. I really do. And I'm glad that he's kind of, achieved the fame in posterity that he has, because I think he deserves it. And I think more people ought to read his books. I have several other books by him. I think I have most of his books, and this just encouraged me to read more. There's a little bit of something for everyone here. A lot of fun. Okay, the next book I finished is definitely a chunker. This was 800 pages. The Coming of Age by Simone de Beauvoir, the existentialist philosopher, partner of Jean-Paul Sartre, author of The Second Sex. As I've said on the channel before, I discovered this at a library sale. Never heard of the book before. Scarfed it up right away, took an interest in it. This is a book about old age. And it's in a lot of ways an indictment of how old age is treated in society. But what I wasn't prepared for, and this is really my first Simone de Beauvoir book, but what I wasn't prepared for was how encyclopedic, how much information she synthesizes in this book. She just runs the gamut, and there's like so much knowledge crammed in here that I was astounded. I was really, really impressed by this effort. And this came out in, I think, 1970 or so. Let me double check. 70, yeah, the original copyright. English translation, 1972. This is a mass market paperback published by Warner Books. Okay, and as long as this book is, it didn't take me that long to get through it, because in a lot of ways it was like an intellectual page turner. Let me give you a sense of the scope of the work. She breaks the book into part 1 and part 2. There's some appendices too, but part 1 is called Old Age Seen from Without, and part 2 is The Being in the World. So the part 1 chapters include old age and biology. So she gets into a lot of the medical science of aging, the aging process. Then she has a chapter on the ethnological data. So she covers ethnology. Then she has old age in historical societies, which is like a 200-page historical sweep through history of how old age has been treated. Amazing, really amazing history survey. And then old age in present day society. And again, this would have been like the 1960s going into 1970. Her main focus is on Europe, France, but also America. But she kind of covers the modern world as best she can. And you learn so much about this topic that it's just like an encyclopedia on steroids. It's just wonderfully written, very lucidly written too. Like, it's written for a general reader. It's not overly complicated. It's accessible and just informative as hell. And then part 2, The Being in the World, this is where she gets a little bit more into philosophy and culture, and things like that. And you see more and more of like the existentialist orientation coming to the fore. She borrows a lot of terminology from Sartre, but yeah, it's really interesting. So you have chapters on the discovery and assumption of old age, the body's experience. You have a chapter on time, activity, and history. You have a chapter on old age and everyday life, and then some examples of old age. And in this part two, if I remember correctly, you get a lot of sort of deep dives. And this might be, I might be blending this with part one too. I can't remember because she just runs the gamut of topics. But you not only get history, you get sort of profiles of individual, famous people, or they were like political leaders like Churchill, or some of the like Clemenceau and like French leaders. You get, cultural leaders and scientific leaders, people like Einstein, and the writers like Victor Hugo, and on and on and on and on, like Leonardo da Vinci. Like she just covers like all these famous artists. She talks about the world of visual art, the world of music, Beethoven, literature, philosophy, going all the way back to ancient times, and how different writers and thinkers conceived of old age and its merits and its deficiencies and the impact it had. Also, the way old age is represented in art and literature. She spends like a ton of time on that. You can just learn so much about all of this stuff by way of looking at it through this old age lens. I was just super impressed by this book. And also a bit surprised, I guess the word would be, I just get the sense that nobody is really aware of this book. I did a little bit of research when I was wrapping up my read of it, and I do think it's still in print. I forget who the publisher is, but you go on Amazon, there's not a ton of reviews of it. Same with Goodreads, places like that. The buzz isn't there around this book, and I think the book is deserving of a much wider reading audience than it's gotten. I think one reason why it's maybe been relatively ignored is this is super sobering, sad stuff. And as someone who is reaching or has reached old age, and I think she wrote this right around the age of 60. I'm 61, so, we're kind of in the same place. It is devastating. It's like first of all, when you see, even going back to like primitive societies, like the way old people were treated, like not so good, to say the least. Like leaving old people out to die when they become too much of a burden and you can't have any more mouths to feed. Like, the way old people get mocked or shamed or just kind of ignored, put out the pasture. And then there are exceptions to this, where old people are revered and respected, and she covers it all. But like the way that the old people are depicted in art and literature, and then just the kind of the biological toll that old age takes, the psychological toll that old age takes, what it does to you, like how it changes your self-perception. These hit home. Like these truths really hit home for an older reader such as myself. But I think it's necessary reading. I mean, we talk about keeping it real. This book keeps it real. It doesn't pull any punches. It is unflinching. And at the same time, it's an indictment of how we currently treat old people in our society. And I think it has a strong message there. There's not a lot of kind of like hopefulness, I would say, in this book. And at the same time, it's not like, it's not trying to make you feel bad about the aging process. What it's basically saying is like, here's the real deal. Here's how this phenomenon feels to people. Here's how different people have coped with it. Some people deal with it better than others. Some societies and cultures deal with it better than others. But there are, problems with the neglect that we deal out to old people that she wants to call our attention to. So, it's not a happy message. I just think people ignore this stuff. Like, they're death afraid to talk about old age. Like, old age is like kind of like the worst thing you could be. Which is so sad, because if we're lucky enough to live long lives with good health, we're all going to get there. Anyway, I don't know what to say. I'm glad I read the book. I really am. And I don't usually do this, but I'm going to jump to the conclusion, because I thought the second to last chapter was maybe the weakest chapter in the book, where I felt like she was just kind of shoveling in a lot of stuff and spinning her wheels a little bit. Like, up to that point, like, it was like seamless. It was like really, really great. But then she kind of rescued it in her conclusion chapter, which is not a long chapter, and I won't read the whole thing, but I do want to give folks some sense of kind of where she comes out here in, what does this all amount to? Like, this is a grand synthesis. That's what this book is all about. It's like synthesizing all these different fields, these ways of thinking about and experiencing old age. So you really want to know, like, at the end, okay, what does this all add up to? And I'm not saying she like totally aced the ending, but I think she did a pretty good job. And I'll just cut in here on page 802, and we'll read a couple paragraphs. Morality teaches a serene acceptance of those ills which science and technology are powerless to abolish: pain, disease, old age. It claims that the courageous endurance of that very condition which lessens us is a way of increasing our stature. If he lacks other projects, the elderly man may commit himself to this. But here we are playing with words. Projects have to do only with our activities. Undergoing age is not an activity. Growing, ripening, aging, dying, the passing of time is predestined, irreversible. There is only one solution if old age is not to be an absurd parody of our former life, and that is to go on pursuing ends that give our existence a meaning. Devotion to individuals, to groups, or to causes, social, political, intellectual, or creative work. In spite of the moralist's opinion to the contrary, in old age, we should wish still to have passions strong enough to prevent us turning in upon ourselves. One's life has value so long as one attributes value to the life of others by means of love, friendship, indignation, compassion. When this is so, then there are still valid reasons for activity or speech. People are often advised to prepare for old age. But if this merely applies to setting aside money, choosing a place for retirement, and laying on hobbies, we shall not be much the better for it when the day comes. It is far better not to think about it too much, but to live a fairly committed, fairly justified life, so that one may go on in the same path, even when all illusions have vanished and one's zeal for life has died away. But these possibilities are granted only to a handful of privileged people. It is in the last years of life that the gap between them and the vast majority of mankind becomes deepest and most obvious. When we set these two ages side by side, we can answer the question we asked at the beginning of this book. What are the inescapable factors in the individual's decline, and to what degree is society responsible for them? As we have seen, the age at which this decline begins has always depended upon the class to which a man belongs. Today, a minor is finished, done for, at the age of 50, whereas many of the privileged carry their 80 years lightly. The worker's decline begins earlier. Its course is also far more rapid. During his years of survival, his shattered body is the victim of disease and infirmity, whereas an elderly man who has had the good fortune of being able to look after his health may keep it more or less undamaged until his death. When they are old, the exploited classes are condemned, if not to utter destitution, then at least to extreme poverty, to uncomfortable, inconvenient dwellings, and to loneliness, all of which results in a feeling of failure and a generalized anxiety. They sink into a torpid bewilderment that has physical repercussions. Even the mental diseases from which they suffer are to a great extent the product of the system. Even if he keeps his health and his clarity of mind, the retired man is nevertheless the victim of that terrible curse, boredom. Deprived of his hold upon the world, he is incapable of finding another because, apart from his work, his free time was alienated, rendered sterile. The manual worker does not even manage to kill time. His gloomy idleness leads to an apathy that endangers what physical and intellectual balance he may still possess. The injury he has suffered during the course of his life is still more radical. The reason that the retired man is rendered hopeless by the want of meaning in his present life is that the meaning of his existence has been stolen from him from the very beginning. A law as merciless as Lassalle's brazen law of wages allows him no more than the right to reproduce his life. It refuses him the possibility of discovering any justification for it. When he escapes from the fetters of his trade or calling, all he sees around him is an arid waste. He has not been granted the possibility of committing himself to projects that might have peopled the world with goals, values, and reasons for existence. That is the crime of our society. Its old age policy is scandalous, but even more scandalous still is the treatment that it inflicts upon the majority of men during their youth and their maturity. It prefabricates the maimed and wretched state that is theirs when they are old. It is the fault of society that the decline of old age begins too early, that it is rapid, physically painful, and because they enter in upon it with empty hands, morally atrocious. Some exploited, alienated individuals inevitably become throwouts, rejects, once their strength has failed them. That is why all the remedies that have been put forward to lessen the distress of the aged are such a mockery. Not one of them can possibly repair the systematic destruction that has been inflicted upon some men throughout their lives. Even if they are treated and taken care of, their health cannot be given back. Even if decent houses are built for them, they cannot be provided with the culture, the interests, and the responsibilities that would give their life a meaning. I do not say that it would be entirely pointless to improve their condition here and now, but doing so would provide no solution whatsoever to the real problem of old age. What should a society be so that in his last years, a man might still be a man? And that's right near the end of the conclusion of The Coming of Age by Simone de Beauvoir. You see what I mean? Pulls no punches, heavy-duty stuff. But this is necessary stuff to think about. We need to confront these problems in order to find solutions to them. or at least to mitigate the plight of older age folks. So yeah, I love this book. I highly recommend it if you can find it. Yeah, that was one of the best discoveries of the year so far. Now, as for quickly, we'll talk about. I finished reading Concerning Civil Government, second essay by John Locke. Did a video on that for my Great Books Reading series. And now I'm reading the Social Contract books 1 and 2 by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. That's going really well. It's a shorter reading, and I'll be finished it real soon. So possibly next week I'll make a video about Rousseau. And then I'm back to reading Niall Williams. This is Happiness. This is Irish fiction. Really, really, really good stuff. But I'm reading it slowly. It's a kind of prose you need to soak yourself into, but I'm hoping to make more progress in this. And I'm also reading this new translation of the Odyssey of Homer by Emily Wilson. I think I'm up to about book 4 and maybe book 5. It's really, really going well. Like I'm finding this to be like a super easy reading translation. And it's rhythmically, it's like really, really good. There's like no complaints about the translation. It's like wonderful. So it's just fun to dive back into Homer. I think every time you go back to Homer, it just gets better and better. So we'll see how fast I get through that. Although I haven't yet, I'm going to be dipping back into Stalingrad by Vassily Grossman. This is a book I found in Vermont last fall and started reading, and I just got kind of sidetracked through no fault of the book. But it's also a big, thick one. But I really liked what I had read so far, and I'm eager to get back into it. So that plus a whole ton of other books, but that's all I'm going to talk about for today. So just to recap, the 2 big ones I finished, both of them I enjoyed quite a bit. The Coming of Age and Jean Shepherd, A Fistful of Fig Newtons. That's my update. Let me know what your thoughts are about these books. You can always leave a comment or send me an email. Email address is in the show description. Hope you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss new episodes. And thanks for sharing time with me. Bye-bye.